Silver Palace is a new upcoming action RPG game that caught my attention the moment I laid eyes on it. As a whole, the game feels dark, with a heavy blend of realism and 19th century Victorian era art, and truthfully, it gave me the chills. Throughout this trailer and the gameplay showcase that I'll be going over today, we'll see just how mysterious and interesting the story of Silveria really is, and I for one am extremely excited for this game's release. To be clear, this game does have you assume the role of a detective, and the action/combat of the title is truly captivating even at a glance. Beyond this, things like diplomacy, deduction, and clue hunting also make an appearance, and all seem equally as interesting as the last system. Each chapter also features mysteries, stories, and things inspired by classical fairy tales, which is truthfully something that hasn't been explored nearly as well as it could in the space. But with all of this, my goal is to also point out certain scenes or details from the trailer that I found noteworthy, So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the initial view that we have of the main character that we see here at around 18 seconds into the scene. Honestly, there isn't much to say about the character, but the clothes, the design, the theme all look pretty incredible, while also being reminiscent of the era and fits. Now, in terms of roughly at this time in the 19 to 20 section of the trailer, we have a first look into the city and the art/style that we can expect from Silver Palace specifically, but it's very polished and looks extremely cool with UI and details that feel very European and fitting for the time or the sort of thematic of the world. Even from just these initial 30 seconds, a few thoughts are already generating in my head. As you can see, one here that is literally reacting to us shooting at another NPC. But in addition to this, we have floating islands in the back and other details that also make the world feel very lifelike and very animated. Additionally, you have things like flying airships that appear in the background as you walk around and as you maneuver through the game, which is also really cool. However, with huge tower and beacons with spheres and stuff also making appearances in the background, overall, the game is not just Renaissance or 1800s feeling. It also kind of feels as though we are taking part in a sci-fi/fantasy completely separate from reality type environment, as of course we've also seen things like monsters. There are also things like smoke coming from chimneys and from some of the locations, which also makes the world feel a bit more realistic. But even if we take a look at roughly the 30-second mark, you can also tell that there are things like purple rails for movement, which also does make the game look a bit more accessible and honestly genuinely more interesting in terms of exploration. Moving beyond this, we also have at roughly 34 seconds a mechanic that lets you identify or inspect a specific character to see exactly what they're up to or what their real identity is. For this specifically, the mechanic looks like it allows you to identify what the character is. It appears as though you may have a clue-like system, which is fitting for the detective role, by the way. But with this clue system, it allows you to take a look at, or I guess suspect, basically what the true identities of these characters are, and in some cases they may appear to be enemies, including things like, again, the big wolf monster that I think is pretty crazy. If we move to the 42-second mark, again, we've also seen a little bit of the combat, and this looks absolutely phenomenal. The combat, the animations of the ultimates, and overall everything relating to the combat as a whole is genuinely jaw-dropping just from this trailer alone. But there are some things to focus on and consider when addressing the combat. First, you can see that the main character from this specific period is timing their attacks in relation to the hits from the enemy. Additionally, there's also animations that seem to be some sort of ability or even a skill with the parry with a particle effect, which is something that you may be able to draw similarities to with other action combat games. But more than anything else, the second that we saw this specific ultimate animation, it looks fantastic, and this is just the main character, which again traditionally doesn't have the most insane looking abilities. Now, as we go to roughly the 55-second mark, again, we have revelation for the other characters available here, including characters like this gunner, and also new inclusion of enemies, including headless figures, which also look very interesting. But we also have, again, the candle looking monsters, which may obviously have alternate versions, which look really cool. In addition to this, we do have very lifelike and animated looking faces and expressions from the cast that are obviously introduced too, with animation and details and visual effects through weather and things of the sort that also look incredible as well. Next, the lady or the characters that we have already seen do have incredibly detailed eyes, as you see here, with there appearing to be an entire universe honestly between or behind her design. But once we get to roughly the minute and 22-second section, this is where more of the detective and it feels like the mystery starts. Again, we have things like the rain hitting the floor to generate this ominous feeling, while also having a steampunk camera specifically lying flying in front of a character that appears to be lit on fire. Beyond this, it should be known that the lighting for a nighttime scene also looks really good, but roughly the 1 minute and 26 seconds section, we're also introduced to another character who has a big white coat carrying something red on her back, which of course we aren't super familiar with right now. It does feel as though there's a chance that regarding what her role is, that she has some sort of medical or healing role, as this additional piece or this additional fixture here looks similar to that of a syringe. But as we get to a bit further into the trailer, we have things like the travel mechanics at 2 minutes in the game, which honestly looks absolutely fantastic. Traversing through a game and even having other mechanics like, I guess, jabbing or backstabbing or assassinating enemies from behind also look fantastic. But it is undeniable that through all these quick time events, all these very high action combat moments, that the game is seeking so much and aiming to really set themselves apart from what is already traditionally present in current gacha games. Now, as we move into the specific gameplay showcase section, there are many systems that are already being shown, including things like the lobby / hideout / base, the party system here on the right, and a lot of the gacha systems that you can honestly expect from any similar game of this kind, especially in 2025. Once we move past to roughly the 1 minute mark, there are things like walking into the city that look absolutely fantastic. The world looks animated. There are clapping, dancing, walking characters, trains, transportation that's moving even while you aren't, and of course things like ambient sounds or animals or creatures moving around too. Once we get to roughly the 2 minute mark, we also have things like the UI that are further and more intricately described, and it also allows us to look into things like the mount UI and things like the stats or the skins available. Once we're at 2 minute and 40 second section, however, we see drifting on horses, which is absolutely ridiculous, but more than anything else, having access to a mount in a game like this for the main character already bodes very well in terms of how interesting or how unique the game already currently feels. Now, in terms of comfort and feeling, I also think that how mount and movement in any game is extremely important, and just from what we've seen thus far, it does feel like Silver Palace is excelling in all these systems. Now, once we get into roughly the 3 minute and 32 section, we start to see more of the combat and UI systems readily available. We see things like the health bar on the enemy, in addition to what appears to be a stamina bar, and the stamina bar increases whenever the enemy blocks or perfect blocks and deals damage, and once the bar is full, you can interact with the enemy and have a combat animation occur, which allows you to then hit or perform a specific special attack, which may break something like their poise or their stagger in this specific title. After this section, we have a menu which kind of lets us see the different map systems where you can do things like hunt enemies, find certain targets, or find certain points of interest on the map, and overall the map does look very cool. The next system that we see, however, is the grapple system, and with this we have our first look at the unique travel system without, of course, things like the mount included. Now, again, in terms of traversing and running through the roofs, honestly, this is one of the more unique ways to have access to the rooftops of any location. But once we reach roughly the 5 minute and 13 section, we see a full-blown flying mount section, which is honestly just the icing on the cake for honestly why this game looks so incredible. Now, if you're someone that has played other titles or any exploration-based game, being able to run across or fly in the world is one of the most captivating and one of the most thrilling activities that you can do. And given how smooth and how quickly you're able to traverse through this world, regardless if it's day or night, I for one am personally extremely excited for this feature specifically. Now, in addition to this, as you can see through certain cases, when you're flying through or running on roofs, there are small intricate details that feel extremely lifelike and truthfully make the game feel very immersive. That includes things like clopping on the ground, that includes things like leaves flying out of the trees, and even things like the mount disappearing, all make the game feel very different and unique for what is currently available in the market right now. Now, moving past this, they also introduce just how interesting conversation and dialogue can look with extremely expressive characters who honestly are very captivating, don't get me wrong. But then we have the more dark and sinister combat mechanics as well, with things like going through tight spots, which is an extremely interesting and different POV that most games don't even give you to begin with. After this though, we then have an interaction system where you're able to strangle or ambush and take enemies to the ground. If this was the only system by itself, I would say that looks pretty interesting, but then we're introduced to an even crazier mechanic where we start interrogating or putting enemies to sleep with the syringe, knocking them out, or eliminating them for real and putting them to bed for sure. And of course, this, in addition to the quick time events, makes the game extremely interesting, for lack of a better word. Beyond this, we also have a bit of a cinematic or an animation slash scene that takes us straight into a boss fight. And let me tell you, having a boss fight in general is already pretty rare, but in terms of what the boss that we are encountering in this case has to offer, it is absolutely ridiculous. From just what we've seen briefly, the actual combat and the mechanics that the boss possess are honestly pretty ridiculous. This boss that we've seen currently is a carriage riding, flame wheel having menace who shoots at us while also having the ability to jump in the sky with her carriage, which is ridiculous. The actual visuals of the boss, in addition to the mechanics, make this seem like one of the more interesting things that you'll have access to once the game actually releases. Beyond this, I am honestly super excited for everything that the game has to offer. I cannot wait for more details and more information to be released about when this game is actually being set for its launch. And until then, guys, I can't wait to see what more details Silver Palace has to offer. This has been an absolute delight and treat to enjoy, and man, I wish this was me. But anyways, that's going to be it for today's video. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night.